What's good, everybody? Welcome back. We appreciate you and only you joining us for the InsideCarolina.com podcast, an episode of Coast to Coast. And I got to admit to you folks, we're lying just a little bit this week because everybody's on one coast again. Uh, with me, as always, I'm your host, Joey Powell. But joining me, as always, Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan. And Sean is the one that is violating the title of the podcast this week by not being on the left coast. He's actually in NYC right now. Sean, how are you, bud?
Doing well. Just taking a little journey through the East Coast before heading on back.
Fair enough. Well-traveled man is a well-educated man. Sherrell, how you feeling?
I guess I'm not very educated then. I've been basically nowhere in the last 15 and a half months.
Same. I'm actually getting dumber by the moment. If you can believe that.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners who are out there, I want you to know this is take 2 of tonight's fabulous episode of the podcast because we are committed to giving you all news as it breaks here. And rather than have news of an offer from North Carolina breaking after we've recorded the episode, as has been the case in 2 episodes past, we actually caught this one in the middle of the show. So I'll let Sherrell get to that a little bit in a few moments. But first, I want to make sure that all of you who are listening right now, if you're watching us on YouTube or if you're listening via podcast, whatever you're doing, take a second to subscribe. Make sure you're getting all this content goodness automatically uploaded to whatever platform you have. That way you don't even have to think about it. It's just there for you. You can take it in whenever you want to. And also, I'm going to ask you to rate us if you wouldn't mind. Rate, review, leave a review, please. That's always good for us. But definitely rate us. Let us know what you think. We don't want to put out garbage. And I want to make sure that if you guys feel like what we're doing is garbage, let us know and we'll stop making garbage. But we hope that you guys like what we're putting together because Sean and Sherrell definitely bring the heat every time we put one of these shows together. So hopefully tonight is living up to the mark that we have set so much in prior episodes. Also, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Man, listen, the spring sports extravaganza that has been going on in Chapel Hill this semester is absolutely in full swing. Granted, it's sad to see that the men's and women's soccer team lost in the Final Four, but hey, 2 great seasons. The women's field hockey team brought home a national championship. Erin Matson is the GOAT. Check her stats if you don't believe me. That's their 3rd straight national championship. We still got men's and women's lacrosse doing big things in their tournaments, both as number 1 seeds, men's and women's tennis, also still playing well, highly seeded in those tournaments. I share this with you because if you like any of those teams and want to rep those teams, you need to get to johnnytshirt.com or stop by and see them on Franklin Street. Johnny T-Shirt is your spot. All of the gear, all the name brands, all the best pricing you are going to find that you are going to lay your eyes upon. Hit them up. Johnny T-Shirt's fans of Inside Carolina, fans of the University of North Carolina, and we're fans of theirs. We want to make sure that you are spending your money in the right place. And premium subscribers from IC know you get that extra 10% off the top. With all that business out of the way, boys, tonight's episode, we're going to recap all of this offer goodness because, as I mentioned, as soon as we wrapped the show 2 weeks ago, it seemed like the floodgates opened. And, as usual, Sherrell, Sean, the entire IC writing staff was all over it. But we missed being able to talk about it here on the Coast to Coast with you. So, boys, the first thing we're going to do before we talk about any sorts of like recruiting philosophy or meshing together a team, any of that, we're going to go through the list and we're going to bang out all these lists. I'm going to list the offered prospect in the 22 class. I'd like for each of you to give a quick hitter about each one of them. And just for our listeners, you can go to the Inside Carolina premium message boards, see the recruiting classes up there. The recruiting board is pinned to the top. Check all that out. You can see all of this. You can see Sherrell's information, dossier about the kid, Sean's game breakdown for each one of these players, which are usually some really good insights so you can understand who we're talking about. So, guys, quick hitters. I'll name the prospect, and then Sherrell and Sean, if you would respectively give me some quick feedback for our listeners. Cool?
Works for me.
All right.
Sounds good.
First guy on my list, Chris Livingston, one of the top 10 players in the country, 6'6" wing forward out of Akron, Ohio. Sherrell.
So he is really one of the top players in the country, and I was a little surprised by the offer, just because there are no known kind of regional ties to North Carolina and to the UNC staff. But he's a player who's played really really well this spring. Tremendous size, pretty good athleticism, is a good shooter. Just kind of that your beast type player. That is Chris Livingston. So something Hubert Davis must have liked something he saw. I mean, obviously he's a top 10 player. And I think, North Carolina has some work to do in his recruitment if it wants to be viable.
Sean.
6'6", 200. Started number 3, currently ranked number 6 in the country, but is the best player from Akron since LeBron James. So he's had to live up to, kind of always being mentioned in that aura. But yeah, very talented, very aggressive, great ability to get to the rim. Back when USA, FIBA Americas, the World Cups were going on, he played on the U16 team, and he was the FIBA Americas MVP. So early, he's been on the stage from the very beginning. But as Sherrell said, a very talented guy, but quite possibly a long shot from a recruitment standpoint. We'll see.
Awesome. And Sean, as you know, I am a sucker, mainly because I'm a knuckle dragger with a very small brain, but I'm a sucker for player comps. So any of those you feel like you want to throw out, feel free, and I will say that they're from me, so that you're not offended. But if anyone in the audience wants to glom onto those and appreciate those, then they can certainly do so. All right, next on the list, Jalen Washington, 6'10", power forward out of Gary, Indiana, home of Michael Jackson and the J5.
I was going to shout out the J5, but you beat me to it.
Sorry, man.
He's a kid who's had a lot of injuries through the first 3 years of high school. He had a shoulder thing, I think, his freshman year, and then he missed either all or most of his sophomore year with a torn ACL. Last year was really about, I think the old adage about it takes a year to fully recover from an ACL tear. I think he's kind of showing that to be true, because he's really starting now to show some of the athleticism he had before. I think he'll never get 100% of it back, but in his mind, and I think in the mind of his coaches, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because for the first part of his basketball career, he kind of relied on his athleticism, and in their minds, he's become much more skilled over the last couple of years. And you're talking about just a real long kid who can impact the game, I think, offensively, and then I think he could really be really, really good defensively, blocking shots and being a rim protector.
I absolutely love his game, as I told you guys off the air. Sean, what do you think about Jalen Washington?
I might go Miles Turner.
There you go, with a player comp. Love it.
Wanted to make you happy. 7'2" wingspan. Similar going back not a few years, but numerous years ago. Miles Turner had some injury concerns, injury issues. But for Washington, he's a face up. 6'9", 6'10", can face up, has a nice compact shot that he can really hit out to the 3-point line. And as a guy that currently is ranked as outside of the top 20, but in the top 25, and he could be one of those, what I call kind of gold mines, where he's a top guy that, might not be the one and done type player that the majority of the top players are. So very skilled, and will be a fun one to watch going forward.
Awesome. All right, next, and I'm going to tell our listeners and our viewers, a lot of 5-letter J names in this class. All right, you got a lot of Jalen's, you got a lot of Jaden's. We're going to have next one is Jarris Walker, 6'7" wing forward out of ING Academy in Florida. Sherrell.
Yeah, so he is an original Roy Williams offer from back in the day, it feels like now. And wanted to point out too about the Coast to Coast. We recorded a podcast on, I believe it was April 4th, that Sunday night, about who might be the UNC head coach. And it was posted that morning at like 10 a.m. And by 11 a.m., basically everybody knew that
everybody knew it was going to be Hubert.
So we've been cursed now going back, almost 2 months. So yeah, Jarris, he's a powerful player. I think that's the thing you see the most when you first watch him play. I think his skill has to improve and has to catch up to his physicality. But he's someone who definitely can come in and play, at a high major school and play at a big time level. He's been at IMG Academy, I think, since he was a freshman. So, he's kind of been ready to play college basketball for some time. So whoever gets him is going to get somebody ready made to come in and be a really junkyard dog, rebounder type player who can do some other things as well.
Yeah, Sean, I know you're really high on his ability to finish at the rim. What do you think about Jarris Walker?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out Stanley Johnson, although Stanley was definitely more skilled at this point, but he was kind of a freak of nature in terms of his size and strength in high school. And then also maybe a better version in high school than a Jay Sean Tate, somebody with the Rockets who is known for his versatility and really his ability to guard a lot bigger just due to his strength, as well as smaller due to his quickness and athleticism. But for Walker, I mean, the guy is an absolute physical beast, and he can get to the rim, overpower people. I think right now when he shoots it from three, it's almost like a prayer that goes up. So he really needs to work on his outside shot. But from a physical standpoint, he has everything. And right now it's just going to be working on that skill to really see his full potential come out.
All right, next guy, 6'8", wing forward. I feel like he's got a lot of ball handling skill in him, though. Only mentioning this kid because he's still on UNC's offered list, but Mark Mitchell, Mark Mitchell.
Yeah. So again, another Roy Williams kind of legacy offer. A very versatile player. Someone who I think could play some four, and really could play some three in a pinch in college. But I think he wants to eventually be more of a three. I know Eric Bossi has kind of made a comparison to Harrison Barnes for him in the past. So if that kind of gives you a mindset of who he is on the basketball court. However, he hasn't set up anything with UNC, and he's starting to take official visits, including one in June to the school down the road. And that usually is a sign that things aren't trending in a way that's positive for UNC.
Sean?
I'll go with a poor man's Lamar Odom, just in terms of the ball handling, size, versatility. And when I say poor man, I mean that's still a compliment, right? Because Lamar Odom's was a very talented NBA player. But he's a guy that improved. He was, I think, just outside of 5-star status when he was offered, and then is now considered a 5-star, but very versatile. Has a few counter moves when he gets cut off, and I think needs to improve the athleticism a little bit. But once again, he came out with his at least 4 initial visits, and usually when somebody's setting a Duke visit without a UNC visit, that doesn't bode well for the most part.
Sure, and I'm going to take the high road here and not make a Kardashian joke since you dropped Lamar Odom as a comp. All right, next, and I told you we had more of these. We got a Jaden Bradley, again, also a kid from IMG, which, as Sherrell mentioned earlier, if you're playing IMG, you're seeing some good talent not only around you, but in who you're playing. Around the top 15, I think, is where Scout has him. Kid is actually from where's he from in North Carolina?
He's from Concord.
Concord, that's right. He used to play in your backyard. I don't know why. I think I'm getting him mixed
Right
up with
here.
Deontay Green, who we'll talk about later from Asheville. But talk to us about Jaden Bradley.
Yeah, so he's kind of a true point guard, I would say, from Rochester, New York, but his parents moved to North Carolina like 4 years ago, I think. So kind of Concord is his like second home. Another legacy Roy Williams offer who Hubert Davis has reaffirmed. And I really, really think that he is someone who could come into a program and just have a positive stabilizing effect. I think North Carolina in particular has had some issues going from point guard to point guard to point guard. Hopefully that'll be different with Caleb Love back for his sophomore season. But Bradley, if anything, it's consistent and stable and solid. So that's what you get with him. And he plays for a team CP3 on Nike's EYBL circuit, and they always, are taught well and play well. So, I mean, he's a player that North Carolina, I think, has a chance with, and he's looking to possibly set up a visit in June. But they're going to have to fend off, schools like Kentucky and potentially Duke and schools like Kansas if they want him.
Yeah, and kid coming from Rochester to Concord, it just says so much about what's happening there at Exit 49 and the Bass Pro Shops and all this. So I'm just big shout out to that area. Sean, what do you want to say about Bradley's game?
Hard to follow that one up, but his biggest strength is in transition. Good size at 6'3", a good build, can get a little bit stronger, but once again, he kind of excels, I'd say, free throw line to free throw line in terms of being able to defend, push the ball, has a nice hesitation move. I'd say right now is an adequate outside shooter. I think at IMG this year, maybe some growing pains early on, but the fact that he was there as a junior, will have his senior year there kind of on the national stage. It'll be interesting to see, can he perform up to really the top 10, 15 ranking that has been put on him really throughout his high school career. And he played decent in the Kansas City tournament the other weekend. So, once again, a talented point guard and one of the first offers for UNC under Roy Williams for this class.
Awesome. Moving on next, out of Sherwood, Arkansas, a 6'4" wing guard who was actually offered at the tail end of last calendar year. Nick Smith, another top 25 kid. Sherrell, what about Nick Smith?
Yep, legacy Roy Williams offer. I think they liked his scoring ability was the main thing. In that, they talked with players about the last couple of years how scoring has just been at times an issue for them, and they want guys who can come in and do that. I'll defer to Sean on a more full breakdown of his game, but Carolina and Arkansas targets haven't fared well recently. And it's a lot of it is because Kentucky's so close, and then it's hard to get those kids out of Arkansas as well, because Arkansas, for whatever it's worth, Arkansas I think does a good job with in-state kids, except for the ones who end up going to Kentucky. So almost all Arkansas kids, it seems like, go to either Kentucky or Arkansas, but you never know. Well, you get somebody on campus and see what happens.
Sean?
Yeah, I'd say the one word to describe him is smooth. In terms of his scoring ability, I think he's a natural two guard, but he can handle the ball. So kind of that 2/1, that could morph into a one down the road for NBA teams. But I think in college, it'll be his scoring, shooting ability, and he can do that off the dribble, which I think is extremely important. So he can create his own shot, but coming from SEC country, with how a lot of those schools have been doing in recruiting, I'd put my money on an SEC school to get him. But he is a guy that I think is a little underranked, and I think is an immensely talented scorer going forward.
Man, underranked and in the top 25 says a lot. Hey, look, next one, Derek Lively, another big kid from Belafonte, Pennsylvania, 6'11", true five man. Sherrell.
I don't have much on him. I'll be honest. I've watched highlights, but as far as his recruitment, we just haven't, as a staff, we haven't really been able to gain a ton of traction there. I know that his offer was originally from Roy Williams, and it was reaffirmed by Hubert Davis. And he's a big who wants to play in pick and roll and pick and pop and wants to do the modern things. So perhaps that's a little bit different now under Hubert Davis, since we know that that's what Davis wants. So maybe he looks at UNC a little bit different. I think under Roy Williams, just because of style of play, it was a non-starter. It was an offer they felt like they had to make because he's a talented player. But we'll see, if something comes of it with Davis.
Sean, Derek Lively's game, true five?
True five. I mean, from an AAU perspective, he's playing with Jalen Duran, who is, I think, top 1, 2, 3 guy, and is a physical beast himself. So they have a very vaunted front court. But in terms of Lively, I think when he was offered by Roy Williams, there's definitely a lot of articles and quotes about him, shooting threes, and he definitely does that and can do it. But in some of the games I've watched, he was in the post a little more than expected. I think for him, he's still coming into his body very, very thin, so he can get pushed around, but a lot of length, so he can really protect the rim, but still just needs to, he can go up and down a lot without making an impact. But at the same time, you can see with the size, the length, the skill, that the potential is there. So, for him, he's a true five, but similar to pretty much everybody we're going to talk about is at a 4 or 5, he can step out and shoot it a little bit too.
All right, so these next three are kids that we've talked about at length on this show, and all three of them do have confirmed visits set up with North Carolina beginning in June. First one, and again, we don't need to put a whole lot of bait out about this one, but Isaac Trout. Sherrell?
You keep it going, and we got the week. I'm impressed. Yeah. So again, Ford from Nebraska, who has now set up an official visit to UNC at the end of June. And I would just say too, just because a player has set up an official visit for June, doesn't necessarily mean that their recruitment is winding down. A couple of years ago, the NCAA changed the rules that you had 5 junior year official visits and 5 senior year official visits. So these, as long as they're before August 1st, are considered junior year official visits. Now, we've never seen anyone take all 10, but just because they're taking a June official visit doesn't mean they're getting close to a decision, even though they could be. So I just want to throw that out there. But again,
Yeah, yeah.
a skilled forward, pretty much what we're seeing from Hubert Davis: skilled forwards, versatility, who can shoot, and Trout can do all those things. He's also visiting Michigan State and a couple of other schools. Nebraska is the home state school. We'll get the first crack at it. So yeah, a player that I think UNC had watched for some time, but just never quite pulled the trigger on the offer until Hubert Davis. And he was the first high school offer for Davis as head coach.
Sean, Trout's game.
Yeah, skilled shooter. 6'9". He can handle the ball a little bit as well, but very, I think, fundamentally sound. And he's a guy that can score from all three levels. But while he can shoot, he does have a smooth shot. He's not afraid. He's not going to shy away from catching the ball in the post. So he can score from a few different areas, but definitely a guy that can come in, can play a few years in college, and will definitely, with his skill set, be able to deliver pretty quickly.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Again, not really sure what's going to happen with Trout. It remains to be seen. Who's going to be able to net that player for their program. Next, Justin Taylor, 6'6" wing forward out of Charlottesville, VA.
Legacy offer from Roy Williams. Really talented, I think, scorer, very skilled, and someone who they've compared to Justin Jackson prior to Hubert Davis taking over. I think he's a player Hubert Davis has put a lot of time into, as well as Jeff Lebo. We haven't really mentioned him as an assistant coach as on the recruiting trail yet, but Jeff Lebo is kind of the primary with Justin Taylor.
First time we've mentioned him on this show.
Yeah, he'll officially visit in June, and he doesn't have a cut list yet. I would expect that soon, but it's looking like Syracuse, Indiana, Virginia, Carolina, and I believe Virginia Tech as kind of the five I would say are kind of out in front. And we'll kind of see what happens. It would be very hard for UNC to, I think, beat out someone like UVA from someone from Charlottesville
Yeah.
to beat out UVA. But, there's a chance. He's talked very favorably about Hubert Davis specifically in UNC.
Sean, Justin Taylor's game.
Great size for a wing at 6'6". He started the Kansas City weekend off, so not this weekend, last weekend, dropping 30 points for team takeover. And I think 12 of those came from the free throw line. So he had a mix of getting to the rim, getting fouled, scoring at the rim, hitting from three. So I really like his game, and I think he has a good mix of athleticism and skill, and he's he can score from all over the court. He's been working on really his first step and getting to the basket, but the guy can play. And once again, coming from Charlottesville, UVA is a front runner, but at the same time, you think UVA has tried to have locked him in early, and the fact that he's still open says that he wanted to pursue others, at least in my mind. So that doesn't always make Tony Bennett happy in terms of recruiting. So I think get him on campus and see what happens. But I really like his game.
And so last kid that we have before we talk about the brand new hot off the presses offer is somebody we've talked about at length here from Asheville via the Christ School, Deontay Green, 6'9", traditional power forward. Sherrell, any notes that we haven't talked about Deontay?
Yeah, he actually, since the last time we talked, he's going to officially visit NC State the week before his UNC visit, and he just added a visit to Tennessee, I think 2 weeks after his UNC visit. And those have been, since we've been talking about him, those are kind of been the three schools that we thought are out front. One of the assistant coaches at Virginia Tech, I believe, left to go to Illinois. So I think Illinois might be trying to talk to him a little bit, but I would be there. He's going to either Tennessee, Carolina, or NC State. I can say that with like 99.9% degree of certainty. It's just a matter of which of those schools I think he ultimately picks, but I don't see him going too far from home.
Sean, you still feel like athleticism is the biggest thing that Deontay Green needs to work on?
Yeah, in terms of explosiveness, but I, was able to Sherrell see him in person. Was able to watch a little bit of his tape from last weekend, and it has looked like he's filled out or gotten, or at least he's playing a little bit stronger. But he's a guy can shoot from the outside, but as we talked about on the podcast, in terms of his just explosiveness off the rim. But I thought he was running the floor fairly well, so I think that was one thing we saw early on, but it was just finishing around the basket. But I think he's been able to improve on that point. But once again, we'll need to continue kind of that upward trajectory.
All right. Well, this is what we actually had to shut down the first take of this podcast for. But we'll get into it. Sherrell, I'm going to let you go into it a little bit. And then, Sean, if you want to, as always, provide some color about his game and what UNC fans can expect as they hear more about. But Will Shaver, confirmed earlier tonight by our own Sherrell McMillan, got an offer from Coach Davis. And I'll let you take it away, Sherrell. Talk about Will Shaver a little bit, 6'10" kid out of Birmingham, Alabama.
So I think the first thing is that UNC has had some contact with him prior to Hubert Davis becoming head coach. We didn't know that until really about a week ago, but they had talked to him a little bit and just said, we want to watch you, we want to see you in action. And he's had two big weekends in a row. He plays for a team called Pro One on the Under Armour circuit, and they were at the Lake Point facility outside of Atlanta. I think it's actually Emerson, Georgia, 2 weeks ago, and he had a really big game with 33 points. I think he hit 5 threes, just kind of dominated. So that obviously got UNC's attention again, and they watched that. And then he had a tournament in Tennessee this past weekend where he played really well again, and I think that maybe pushed Hubert Davis over the top towards an offer. And they had been talking, him and Hubert Davis have been talking via text over the weekend, and he called tonight, which is Sunday night, and gave him the offer. Again, 6'10" guy. He has the skills and the things that Hubert Davis wants in his big men. But the other thing is that he recognizes and doesn't forget that he's also 6'10" and that he can play in the paint. So he is a true kind of inside outside guy. And the word we've gotten is just he keeps getting better and better. So I would urge everyone to, again, with the 22 class, the rankings right now don't mean a whole lot. I think you'll see a reconsolidation of them or a re-ranking over the summer. And I would trust the ones in September after the national guys like Bossy and Travis and Deshaun and Brandon and Jerry have been able to see them. I would trust those a little bit more than the ones you see right now. Because he's listed at, I think, number 147.
Yeah,
Which you look at his offer sheet and look how he's playing, obviously that's going to be too low.
that's
So I would say just ignore that and just look at the offers and how he's played. And they really like him, I think, from what we can gather.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that out. I think that's the first thing a lot of folks are going to look at is the fact that he is a top 150 recruit as opposed to the top 20s that Hubert Davis has been offering recently. But your point is a great one. Offers from the likes of Alabama, Florida State, Illinois, Iowa, Stanford. I mean, there's Auburn. There's quite a few teams on there that North Carolina would consider to be peers, or the standard fan would consider to be you know strong programs. Sean, you talk to us a little bit about Will Shaver's game.
Yeah, well, just to piggyback on that, I mean, I think anybody outside the top 50 is extremely hard to rank right now, just given the high school seasons, the lack of summer ball last year. So would agree with what both of you guys said in terms of his game. 6'10", he was able to get in the gym and lose about 40 pounds. I think going into his junior year of high school, where he helped his team in Alabama win their first and I think the largest class in Alabama, their state championship. But he's a guy that is still working on the body, but he's pretty long, and he can finish. He loves the 2-footed jumper, so he can finish powerfully at the rim with that length. But as Sherrell mentioned, he's comfortable stepping outside and hitting from three. And I think just once again, haven't been able to watch a full game, which I want to do, but in terms of the highlights, you see how he's making the threes, and it was just kind of middle of the net every time, just straight swish, which would kind of showed something in terms of his marksmanship. But will be interesting to see how he progresses. But as Sherrell mentioned, 2 tournaments in a row he's been playing well at, and if he can continue shooting like he has been, mixed with that size, you can see, maybe it's not freshman year, but you can see him, turning into something, sophomore, junior year.
And I know you guys both talked about him developing and kind of growing into his game and growing into himself. But if you look at the pictures of the kid, he's got the frame right now. I mean, despite his 6'9", 6'10" listing now, he's still got the frame that looks as if he could fill out and still be an absolute beast in the post. As you said, Sean, maybe a sophomore or a junior year. Anything else you guys want to say about Will Shaver, newest offer for the UNC Tar Heels in 2022?
Just a continued trend by Hubert Davis and all the guys he's looking at, all the players he's looking at. Versatility is a key thing. Shooting ability is a key thing, and then I guess the ability to play with kind of modern concepts, which would be switching, pick and rolls, and pick and pops, all the stuff we're tired of talking about, just because it's been such a big deal lately. They all have that skill, and I think Shaver is another one. Just versatile, can do kind of things, can play in and out if need be. He could be a post, and he could he could be the 5 and pass out to a 4 who's a shooter, someone on the team now, someone like Justin McCoy, or he could be kind of the 4 in function and throw it into the 5, whoever that is in the post. And just having that ability to create space, to create room for the guards is going to be huge, I think. So I think as time goes on, we're seeing more of a picture of what Hubert Davis's teams will look like. I don't think we're seeing a complete picture, but I think we're getting pieces. And then we see him making sure that UNC is kind of covered in the 2022 class. I think in the past, the philosophy maybe wasn't as quick on the trigger for offers, but I think you've seen this coaching staff say that that's not going to be the case anymore, and that they're going to go after players, even as they recruit guys maybe higher on the board. So I think Ben said it best. What you're seeing is kind of a recruiting board come to shape. We haven't even talked about guys like Tyler Nickel and Seth Trimble and Cam Kraft, who we know that Hubert Davis has been in contact with, who don't have offers but are probably going to be close. So those are additional prospects. So I think we just have to get used to more offers. Whether or not he's going to be like this every class, I don't know. I think UNC was a little behind in 2022 as Roy Williams left and they transitioned to Davis. So is it that they were so behind and needed to make a lot of offers to catch up, or is it this is kind of standard operating procedure moving forward? I think that's a question that has to be answered and won't be answered until the kind of 2023 class is signed and on campus.
And that's a strong caveat too that I think our listeners need to really pay attention to, that you don't know if this is the way it's always going to look. But as Sherrell so eloquently pointed out, they had some catching up to do. Roy was kind of sitting back and waiting to when he could see players again to reoffer them. And then when he decided to retire, this staff has to jump in not only and put together a 22 class, but they've also got to decide what they want their philosophy to look like. Sean, I've seen a ton of these guys, as Sherrell has mentioned. Shooting seems to be the number one priority. Versatility is probably a 1B if there is a such. How do you feel like a lot of these kids' games, if you could describe them in 1 or 2 words, what are you seeing? What trends are you seeing amongst all of the offers that we just went through in the last half hour?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the key thing outside of Walker is shooting, and once again, that was an early offer. So I think we've seen with Shaver 4 players that Hubert Davis has offered, and every one of those has everyone, when you're looking at the report or looking at the game tape, is shooting, and I think that's going to be a priority where sometimes maybe there's been a kind of a 3, 4, 4, 5 that hasn't had that ability, and maybe there's some athleticism that negates that. But then when you get into the thick of things in ACC, it's much easier to play off those guys. So I think the key word is everybody's been talking about is shooting. That's something we saw with the transfers that with Manic, et cetera, and that's something we're continuing to see right now with these offers. And I think it'll also be interesting to see once the coaches are out, how that, are they going to offer a lot of guys? Is it still going to be a select few? Just kind of how the rhythm goes, because you're really talking about 3 out of 4 guys that are in new positions, with Hubert being elevated to the head coaching position. Sean May wasn't, on the road recruiting. And then you have Lebo, who has been out of it, in terms of the college game for a few years. So they've all had to get acclimated pretty quickly. You can tell they're watching a lot of film and a lot of tape to find the guys that fit how they want to play.
Sean, is there one difference you can tell between these 11 kids we just listed from the 22 class that you didn't see when Roy Williams was the head coach?
I'd say it's too early to tell, well, at least for me to tell, just because so many of them still had the Roy Williams, had the Roy Williams offer. So is it more of a courtesy, or would some of these guys, be in that mix? I think, it'll be, the one thing will be the top 10, 15 guys. How are they handled? Right now we see the Livingston offer. Will that trend continue, where there's maybe, 1 or 2 guys picked out? Because I know, Roy wasn't, even though the recruiting battles for those guys didn't really go his way, the last X amount of years, he wasn't shy of getting into the mix. And I think right now there is kind of the surprise offer with Livingston, but will that trend continue, where UNC is going to be competing against the Duke, Kentucky, some of the SEC schools in the G League for, maybe one of those premier guys down the road?
Sean, when you were going a second ago, you made a great frame that is going to take us into our next subject before we get out of here tonight. You're talking about the different roles that guys on this staff have, with an entire new staff, but even the guys that were holdovers have different places within the staff and different places on the bench now. A bit of news that broke last week. Sherrell, I want to kind of touch with both of you guys on this, but Sherrell, I'm going to come to you first. Brandon Robinson, a recent UNC graduate, has been announced that he's going to be a GA for Hubert Davis's staff. And I don't know that we've seen a lot of the official GA role. It's more common in football. But Sherrell, what can we expect from a GA on a basketball staff, or do we even know yet?
Yeah, I would say it's a little too early to know. I mean, the guesses would be, just helping with administrative stuff in the office, maybe cutting up clips of players, kind of getting things ready for the coaching staff, and not just the bench coaches, but the entire coaching staff, to look at, potentially giving their opinion on certain things. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I know that's kind of what some of the GAs do in football. I think Hubert Davis might have said he's the first basketball GA they've ever had.
That would explain why I haven't heard of any for UNC.
Yeah, I think he said that. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But I would expect it'd be that kind of stuff, and just helping him learn more about coaching and being kind of on the other side of everything. So I would guess that's the kind of stuff he'd be doing.
Sean, you feel like this is just a continuation of another way to get more shooters on the staff, and thus hopefully get it to, matriculate or, go through osmosis and get onto the current roster?
Well, I mean, that was something you could, Brandon could definitely do was shoot. And I was kind of surprised at the news, because he was playing in the 3-on tournament during the Final Four weekend, just a month or so ago. And I know, really last year it was hard for a lot of guys to get, if they weren't surefire NBA guys, to get that next opportunity with kind of an abbreviated G League, with lesser amount of G League teams. So I thought, he was probably going to try to do G League or overseas, at least for a year, just to try to see what happened. But, I think everything you have read about him is great. So I think it'll be fun to have him in the fold and get him learning early. So it'll be interesting to see if this is a trend that continues year over year, or maybe this is a one-time thing for Brandon.
Noted. And look, before we get out of here today, I understand that Sherrell has 2 pennies, so he's kind of ripping off your gimmick. But hey, look, man, I know you've got something that you told me about that I'm pretty excited about. You're going to be doing a podcast with somebody that, if there's any listeners or viewers of this that are fans of Last Chance U, why don't you talk about what you got cooking?
Sure. So I've been doing, my own podcast for the last few years. It's been a little infrequent over the last year, focusing on this one, but have Coach John Mosley coming on Tuesday interview with it airing Wednesday. Coach Mosley was the head coach and kind of key figure in Last Chance U that appeared in I think it was a February March timeframe. And for anybody that anybody that's a basketball fan, definitely recommend Last Chance U. It's an 8-episode series on Netflix. But Coach Mosley was a guy that really draws you in with his style and passion, and we'll get a chance to chat with him for 30-40 minutes this week. So excited for that.
And if our listeners want to check that out, which I'm assuming they would, what's the name of the pod that they can search?
Yeah, that'll be the Sean Mo Hoops pod. Have had a few Carolina guys in the past, but we'll put a link on the board once it's done. But excited to talk to Coach Mosley about the experience.
Hey man, I told you before we started recording, I'm kind of fanning out a little bit because he seems like a really, really good dude. So I'm going to be intrigued to hear just how that translates and what you're able to get out of him, because man, those kids he had, at least from what we could see after edit from Last Chance U, man, they were all about playing for him, and he knew how to connect with them, and just a lot about that guy to like. So I'm excited to hear about that. So the Sean Mo Hoops podcast, for all of you listening, be sure to check that out. And I'm sure you will see links to it on Inside Carolina after it drops. And now, for what you all have been waiting for a long, long, agonizing 90 seconds, Sherrell McMillan has 2 more things we want to talk about before we get out of here. Sherrell, what's your 2 pennies?
Yeah, it was just kind of piggybacking off of other things that have been said. So on the Brandon Robinson thing, I think we should remember too, he has a great relationship with Hubert Davis. Hubert Davis was his primary recruiter out of high school, and he's talked openly just about how much of an impact that Hubert Davis has had on him. So they have a close relationship. Maybe it's a situation where he just wants to be in Davis's orbit to kind of see how he coaches and if it's something that he wants to do. And then 2, Will Shaver. I think one thing I forgot to say was that he is obviously from Alabama. He's been working out with Garrison Brooks over the last, I think, month or so. Um, and those 2 have developed a pretty good relationship. And even since the offer went out earlier tonight, Brooks has, kind of tweeted like, "I'm proud of you." Excuse me. So I'm sure they've been talking about North Carolina some. I don't think there's any hard feelings with Garrison and UNC or anything, but that's just something to note, that Shaver has a really good relationship with Garrison Brooks.
Strong. And as we have been recording this podcast through the miracle of technology, our own Sherrell McMillan has posted a freaking write-up about the offer to Will Shaver from the UNC recruiting staff, and just technology continues to be undefeated and continues to baffle us all. So, boys, barring any other sense or injections or interjections or interrejections or interrogations or anything else that I want to butcher before we get out of here, I'm going to say thank you. Appreciate you guys resetting all of the recruiting news for our listening audience, talking a little bit about Brandon Robinson joining, talking a little bit about Hubert Davis and what his staff's philosophy might be. Just really appreciate you guys, as always, coming in here with your A game and leaving us all smarter. So, with that being said, I want to give major thanks to all of you for listening and watching. If you're checking us on YouTube or listening to the podcast, wherever, big thanks to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring. Big thanks to John Siegley for producing. Man always keeps the things cleaned up and posted for you guys to consume out there. But with that said, for Sean Moran, for Sherrell McMillan, I'm Joey Powell. I'm thankful for all of you out there for listening to us one more time. We will catch you next time on the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Late.